All of these people are people that we're bringing into Moore to have critical conversations about how art can change the world. One of the most exciting parts is getting to look out there and find faculty that can support the kinds of students that we want to get into the program. Are people that, on the one hand, are very kind of confident in their abilities as makers and creators, but that they're also people who have a practice that is engaged in the world around them. Some of the kinds of artists that we're bringing on are people that have hybrid kind of identities where maybe they spend half their time working for a neighborhood organization as a community organizer, but then they also spend half their time doing exhibitions in museums.
An early assignment I give to the students is having them think about multiple ways of knowing and how they get to know places. Mm-hmm. So I usually ask them to kind of make a historic map of the last place they've lived and how they came to know that place. So I have them both ask themselves that question about what does it mean to get to know a place, and then also the representational question of then how do I articulate that to my peers. And what I sense in them is sort of two things, is that they realize how much they actually know, that they didn't think about as being formal knowledge, and kind of validating that. And then I also think it, maybe this is me being optimistic, but it mitigates their anxiety about being in a new place, because they realize that they actually have tremendous tools to get to know people, to get to know neighborhoods, to be able to navigate. So using all of that then, over the course of the semester to then translate into multiple ways of knowing through their own studio practice or their own thesis work.
Right now I'm teaching a class on basically public programming, developing a public program in conjunction with their thesis. And so at the first class I asked them to talk about something that they had seen that might relate to their work that they might actually do themselves, for example, and then to talk about the successes and challenges of it. And one thing I do try to stress with them is that it's not even just about visual art. It's about going to go see performances. It's going to go see heritage museums. It's going to go see anything that one might find enriching to their lives. All those things sort of contribute to this cultural being. And then so one term I use with them is being a cultural omnivore, so that they think about all things as important, so not just going to the PMA or just going downstairs to the galleries, and all of these things, and how do these things inform the work that they make, then in turn that contributes to the world out there.
We think about things in terms of form and material, right? And that isn't bound by any one sort of specific medium, right? So it's not simply a matter of thinking about paint and canvas and substructure and representation and all of that, but that we can simultaneously think about the city in that way, right? That the city can be a form and its policies can be a material, and we can manipulate those things to reform the city or to create new forms of the city. And that's something that's happening at the field at large, and I think a lot of contemporary artists are thinking about their practice in that way and are describing it in that way. This is why we go out into the city, so we can learn something about it, so that we can come back and we can think about how to manipulate the things that we learned, and then we can take them back out. So then for us as teachers, it's about establishing the conditions that allow students to come to their own conclusions about how to make the things that they want to happen, right? So that we can set the structures that allow them to sort of flourish and come to their own.
You mean in the studio or just in the world?
Well,
everywhere, both.
Well, I sort of mean both. I mean, I think that this is, and I was kind of leading towards a question to you, because there's something, in other programs that are not about this kind of rich interdisciplinary approach to what it means to be a practitioner, whether that means administratively or artistically or in the studio or in the city or whatever, right? This kind of constellation of things that we're talking about, that there is a way in which our students get to learn administrative skills alongside studio skills. They get to learn research, alongside the more pragmatics of writing a grant or something, right? That they get to utilize this truly kind of interdisciplinary, multi-focused approach to developing a practice, whatever that might mean for them, right? Because I think kind of fundamentally, and the three of us are great examples, is like what it means to work in the arts, whether you're creating platforms for people to do things or you're populating platforms that people create. It's like you have to have a certain literacy in terms of administration and practice in the studio, I mean specifically. So that there is something about cultivating all of these threads simultaneously, which is why I was going to ask you, because you also have a very interesting trajectory of being trained in one way and then sort of arriving at other disciplines along the way.
Yeah, I was going to say the access to the administrative and the aesthetic conversations and the dipping into art history and dipping into sort of urban policy and all of these different things feels very much of the time. Right, so in my day job also, when I think about nonprofit arts organizations across the country, artists working across the country, there is a very active conversation, sometimes debate, about what it means to balance kind of social outcomes and aesthetic practice or aesthetic outcomes or value. And I feel like the students at Moore right now are they enter into the heart of that conversation. The thing to me that feels really unique about Moore as it relates to other MFA programs or MA programs is the proximity between students and practitioners, students and high-level practitioners and high-level kind of scholars and thinkers on the subject. My students have had amazing access to amazing thinkers and people that are doing work nationally, literally directly touching them, talking to them, interviewing them, introducing them to on a panel, going out to to have a celebratory sort of cocktail after the event. I feel like oftentimes they enter in thinking that they're going to learn how to do this messy thing that we call community practice or studio work or social engagement, and they very quickly recognize that they're the ones that are defining that practice. Sure. I'm a person that's trained actually as a urban planner, someone who thinks about place, right? And the two parts to it, right, are people and environment. So I think that's oftentimes when I talk about place, what I mean is the physicality, and then the kind of, I guess we could call that the hardware, and then the software that is the people, the ideas, the beliefs, the imagination, the emotions that are embedded in a physical space. The students are also thinking about, they can't agnostically go into a place and say, I'm just a fly on the wall, I don't exist here, I'm just watching. Like, they start having their own perspective on their role.
Even if you are a studio artist, you still live in a place. Your studio is still located in a built environment. You're still intersecting with hardware and software and malware, let's say, all of the time. And so there's no expectation about how that influences you, right? That it needs to resolve itself or find itself in your work, so far as I'm concerned, but rather to really think about the different contexts that we as people in our work moves through all of the time.